All right, so we are working on TAEPDD401, work effectively in the vet sector. The context of what we're doing, you've got your own RTO within health, right? So the context of what we're doing is that for the purposes of assessments in this course, this is a nice technique. You are applying for a job at an RTO called solid RTO, right? So this first unit is about you getting ready for the job interview, if you like, doing some research to understand what it means to work in an RTO and be compliant within a registered training organisation. You are then going to, from that point, apply for the job and you're going to get the job. And then you're going to have to do a professional development plan for your first couple of months in the job. That's what your assignment's about. That's what the content of this unit is about. This unit is called Work Effectively in the Vet Sector because it's about you understanding the vet sector, the compliance issues around working in a registered training organisation, understanding the system in which we work. Yeah. The next two units, which are TAEPDD401 and 412, are about using training packages and working within a national system. They will follow very logically on from this unit because it's all about understanding the system in which we work. Very important we understand the system in which we work because it is a very unique system and it has its own share of intricate details. I haven't had a light like that in front of me since I was on stage in Goldman, so it's been a while. So if I end up being Bill Sykes, you'll understand why. But that's very bright. Okay. This first lesson is about policy context, vet policy context. We have a vet system. Why? Why do we have a vocational education training system? Why do we have national competencies and national system? What do we want? What do we hope to achieve by having a national system? Consistency, national benchmark. If I'm a mechanic in Perth and I come to Sydney, I'm a mechanic in Sydney as well. Whereas before 1996, I did a Cert 4 apprenticeship in Perth. It didn't necessarily mean I could get a job in Sydney. We have what's called portability of skills. And back then, they wanted to bring in a skills passport. So you have a little passport book and stamp to say you've got this unit. It took a long time for us to get something like that, but we now have a thing called a unique student identifier. That's essentially what the skills passport was going to be. People balk it, it was like the ID card, the Australia card. That same sort of principle. You don't know too much about me. You seem to worry about that less now, because Google seems to know everything about it. So, provides people with opportunities to develop workplace skills and technical knowledge. So it's about building people's skills up. There's a strong emphasis on practical experience and encompasses many industries. Right? So competency is about skills and knowledge. And in the early days, people wanted to make it about attributes as well. People say, oh, you can't measure attributes. You can't measure attitude. Well, you can, because we do it now. We talk about having the right phone manner. I employ somebody once who used to fall asleep and he answered the phone after waking up. So somebody actually said, was he asleep? Because he sounded like he was asleep last time. But we want people with the right belief system about what they're selling, whatever. That's much more controversial than just skills and knowledge, because who's measuring your attitude? But we have a thing called employability skills, and more on that later on. Employability skills are about aptitude for the job, navigate the world of work, literacy, numeracy, language, oral communication, etc. You've got to have those foundation skills, and then you've got to have the key skills for the job that you're doing. And what defines that is a unit of competency, right? So a unit of competency defines this bit of the job, and this bit of the job, and this bit of the job. We put them together for a qualification that defines what you do as a store person, as a diploma, as an enrolled nurse, what we call a Division 2 nurse, what your job is as a senior administrator, a reception, whatever the role, it can be defined by a qualification, which is in the training package for a whole industry. Now, we'll talk about training packages a bit later on today, and that will make a bit more sense. But if I just mention quickly that a training package is for a whole industry, right? So if you imagine that this room is the health training package, this whole room is a training package. Each one of these tables is a qualification within that training package. So this is the Diploma of Nursing Division 2 enrolled nurses. This is ioduric therapy. This is acupuncture. This is herbal medicine. This is remedial massage. All of those are health qualifications. Right? Bachelor of Nursing is not in this because it's not in the training package. It's in the higher education sector. Medicine, GPs, surgeons are in the higher education sector. But the training package covers diplomas, advanced diplomas, certificate 4, certificate 3, certificate 2. People were talking about TAEPDD before. That's generally certificate 1 or certificate 2, certificate 2 in health services, allied health services, assistant in nursing, all of that stuff. All of them had HLT training package. All got units of competency attached to it, all got packaging rules. All of that's going to make more sense by the end of the day. That's essentially the system you're working in. A national training system with units of competency that are endorsed. An industry has signed off and said, this is what you have to be able to do this job. You've got standards for registered training organisations, 2015. What year are we in? 2025. 2025. How old are they? 10 years. What are we doing this year? What are we doing in July? We're moving to the next lot of RTO standards.
Well done.
Yeah?
Oh, don't say that.
No. Standards for RTO. You're not going to be redundant, Phil. I just want another qualification. The standards we work to. Okay?
I feel like you said that like a trigger warning.
Qualification is not going to be redundant.
But the older qualification was redundant.
Updated. So 2022, for a number of years, we've been talking about the RTO standards 2022. So they were developed to be released in 2022. Because of all the argy-bargy that goes on around this stuff, it's now 2025. They've been consulted, they've been pushed and pulled and tugged and refined, and they'll be released in July. They're not going to be a lot different to those standards. It's supposedly going to be easier to follow, more streamlined, more RTO friendly, right? But they're the standards for the organisation. Same as health standards. Not about your qualification.
With the training packages, you mentioned that they were units of competency that were signed off by the industry. So say, who signs off on that? So for example, if I'm thinking construction trade related stuff, is that like the CFMEU? Is there like a concreters association? Like
they all sign on. So the process, and we'll go through this.
Yeah.
But the process is that we used to have what was called ITABs. We used to work for an ITAB, Industry Training Advisory Body. They became industry skills councils. Then they became skills service organisations, and now they're called jobs and skills councils. And they are there for every industry. Every industry has a jobs and skills council. The jobs and skills council generally have more than one industry. So they might have plumbing, construction, things that go together.
That was the gap for me, the skills council.
Yep. So the skills council is the advisory body that advises on the training needs now and into the future. And they make what's called a case for change to the Department of Education and Workplace Relations. And they say, rail system, I'm about to review some maritime units. I reviewed some transport and logistics furniture removal units earlier this week because they've just changed some furniture removal units and modified, they've simplified the language, they've made it more current. So that then goes, so I'm a quality assurer of that. They send it to me for proofing and make sure that it's compliant. And then it goes off to DUA to get endorsed by the Skills Ministers Council. And then it goes on training.gov.au, which is where you find your national current training packages. Right? You'll see superseded and you'll see current. You only want to work with the ones that got green current. So Dewar signs it off and goes, well, Dewar sends it to the ministers to sign off, but they run the standards and the order has been done before. Ministers like to swan around and go to functions and then get a bang. But let's go. Take your secretariat with them as well. All right, so that's the system in a nutshell. On that side, so people, one of my students once described it as they make the car, we drive the car as an RTO, like we deliver the training, and ASCA are the police and regulate how well we drive and what the quality assured passing of road. So ASCA's on this side of the equation, and DUA and training package development are on this side of the equation. They both have the same product in the middle, but they're coming out from different. Okay, so the standards registered training organisations is what ASCA uses to regulate you as a training provider. Make sure that you, as a trainer and assessor, are current and that you meet the regulations. Now, the main regulation that you would be worried about as a trainer is 1.11 A to C. If you look up RTO standards, user guide, it'll be in chapter 4, because it follows a journey. If you look up the legislation, you'll see that it's standard 1.11 A to C. 1.11 A to C says that you must be qualified as a trainer and assessor, which means you must have this qualification or something very, very similar, very, very specific. You must have qualification or competency in what you're teaching. So you don't necessarily have to have a qualification, but you have to map to the unit of competency and be signed off that you are competent to teach forklift driving, warehousing, wound management, patient care, setting up teams and admin. And you have to maintain your currency. So you have to maintain your currency as a teacher, and you have to maintain your currency as a industry expert, right? So you've got to maintain your currency as a nurse. That's fairly easy to do because you've got CPD points that you've got on there. But you've got to use it for the unit that you're teaching. So if you're teaching wound management, you have to show that you are current in your wound management techniques. If you're still using leeches, you're going to be out of step, right? So you've got to show your currency as a teacher and for your profession, for the unit that you're teaching. And that's all going to be mapped so that when ASCA comes knocking on the door to do an audit at your RTO, it's all there to be seen. And the thing that they focus on is who is teaching, what are their qualifications, have they got the qualification to be in that classroom, both as a teacher and as an industry professional? Is it documented? And are you following the timetable? The timetable says we're teaching this week. Is that what you taught? That's the main things they focus on. And then they'll look at the students' assessments and say, how do they go with this assessment? There's a bit missing here. This assessment is not compliant because it didn't have a stakeholder review, for instance. Yeah.
So when you go and look at this entire system of recording and things like that, is there a digital place where you go and upload, for example, all of these things every 6 months, every year, or is that kept within the RTO in terms of
Kept within the RTO.
Yeah, to size it? So when you talk about currency and things like that, what about, for example, if we co-teach a course or we do something like that, is that also counted, or is it only if you are the sole teacher? So if there's two people, say me and Christy are delivering basket weaving, I'm using a very generic example, and we are both teaching it together, we will obviously have the same assessment task, the same students and things like that. But because we can show that we're delivering it together, will we both maintain our competency at the same time? Perfect.
Why are you in that classroom?
Yep.
If you might be there as a guest speaker. You might be there as a previous basket weaver, showing off your wares, literally.
Yeah.
But whoever is teaching and assessing must have the qualifications.
Yeah, which is this, which
Yeah.
we're doing, correct?
And they must have industry. They must know what they're teaching. They must be able to show that they are a basket weaver, and that they're a current basket weaver, not using techniques in the 19th century. You might still incorporate techniques in the 19th century, but you've got to be current practice, and you've got to show that currency.
I have another question, but I can ask you it.
If it's relevant. ask away.
Is everyone okay if I ask the question?
Yeah.
So I think for me, my big question is if the cohort that I'm supporting is corporate services staff, they're not medical and nursing.
That's fine.
So if I have got
Same principle.
the same principle, so I just need to understand it better for myself.
Yeah.
So if I am running whatever course there is, and I can demonstrate that as long as it's demonstrated industry relevance and experience
Mhm.
in terms of what I'm doing, and I've got my cert for training and assessment,
So, you know,
that's all they need. So it is really up to the RTO to go and decide our
that's
relevance.
right. They have to ask you what level of evidence they have.
Yeah.
And what they're comfortable with. But then when ASPA comes and does an audit, they may have an area for suggested improvement, or they may say you're non-compliant. So it's going to depend on, you know, and RTO should go off to conferences and workshops and find out what exactly they need. There are case studies in the RTO user guide that give you an example of what you should keep. But basically, they have to document somehow
Yep.
your currency. So in terms of nursing,
Yep.
it would be CPD. Maintain your registration, you've got to upload to CPD.
Correct.
In terms of RTO, you have to upload. In TAFE, we use a thing called a keep it current form.
Yep.
And on that keep it current form, you say what activity you did, how is it relevant to the unit that you're teaching,
Mhm.
And how you're going to apply it in the classroom.
Okay. I have
And you
one.
reflect on that.
I have one
Yeah?
last question, and
I bet you have more than one last.
I do, but I have a meeting I have to attend. I have one last question. So if I am running certificate in basket weaving, me and Christy have realized that there's a basket weaving need in my corporate services staff.
Yep.
And we put together a unit of work and both of us plan it, design it based on the vet standards, qualifications, all of those things,
Yeah.
and we teach it. Is that then accepted because we've got the industry?
If you're an industry current,
Yep.
and you're a trainer and assessor within this system,
Which, yeah,
and
hopefully
you're teaching a national unit of competency,
so it has to come back to the national unit
Yeah,
of
that's right.
competency.
Because she had to have a confidence unit to match it up here.
Like a certificate.
so if you're doing one back scratch or
Ah.
basket weaving or whatever,
Be a
that
confidence.
has
So
to be
I
there.
need to find that national.
You have to use your unit from the national system.
I understand
If
now.
not, you
Okay,
can do whatever you like. You can teach tiddlywinks, but you're not doing it within the system.
I understand. That is much clearer. Thank you.
Right. So you can do a professional development day. We can do this as a one-day workshop on how to be a better teacher.
Yep.
But that's not in the national system.
As long as I have that, what you said, that
So when you start complaining about your assessments and you say, you want us to do 3 by 30-minute presentations on different skills, and you think I'm making that up just to be nasty, I'm not making up to be nasty. It's what the
No, no.
performance evidence says in that unit of
and will we
competency.
get a link
Yeah.
in the next 6 months of where those things are and sit?
It won't be the next 6 months, it'll be by the end of today.
Oh, amazing. Thank you.
Huh? So,
Sorry, everyone. I just wasn't
No,
clear.
because we'll be easy. So I'm going to refer to training.gov.au,
Yep.
which is where all the units, national units sit. That's your Bible, your Quran, your Torah, your pagan book of rituals, your little book of miracles, whatever, right? That's where you get it from your information. You guys covered everybody with that.
I get that now. Thank you.
So that's what gets endorsed by DUA and the ministers. Once it goes up and it's current, that's where it comes from. If you want to teach something outside of that, that's fine. You don't have to, you're not meeting the RTO standards. You're not working within the Australian qualifications framework. Okay? I'll give you some slides of the Australian qualifications framework in a minute. And that you can watch that video in your own time. It goes to 4 minutes 31. He's not a bad presenter. A couple of things he says in it that I don't fully agree with, but basically 99.9% correct. So nothing that's earth-shatteringly wrong about it. Australian qualification framework from 1 to 10. Certificate 1 to Certificate 10. What is Certificate 1? What is Certificate 2? We call them enabling courses. So to get people into the workforce. It might be about giving them foundation skills around literacy and numeracy or workplace skills. But it might also be about Certificate 1 or 2 in allied health assistant, because they're doing it at year 11, year 12 as a pathway into a career, right? Might be Cert 2 in automotive because they want to be a motor mechanic. Then we have Certificate 3. What is Certificate 3? Certificate 3 is generally an apprenticeship or traineeship. It's the first qualification that you will get as a tradesperson. Sometimes Certificate 4. The Certificate 3, you're working under supervision with limited independence. Certificate 4, you're starting to work with less supervision and more independence. And Diploma, you're generally going to be managing other people or be a more senior practitioner in your area or doing a much more complex thing. So you do a diploma of biotherapy, for instance, or remedial massage. That's going to be a higher level qualification than a Certificate 4 in remedial massage. Then we go from Certificate 4 to Certificate 5. What do we call a Certificate 5? A diploma. It's just known as a diploma. Now, for the record, another little point like empathic, always a diploma of and a Certificate 4 in. So you'll see people who write diploma in. It's not a diploma in, it's a diploma of. Certificate 4 in. Certificate 3 in, Certificate 4 in, then diploma of, bachelor of. The Certificate 5 is diploma. Certificate 6
Advanced.
is advanced diploma. Certificate 7 is bachelor's degree. Certificate 8, bachelor's degree with honours. Certificate 9, masters. Certificate 10, PhD. What does the vet system focus on? Certificate 1 to advanced diploma, Certificate 6. There are some degrees, but they are in higher education. Tertiary education covers vet qualifications and degree qualifications and master's qualifications. Tertiary covers everything after secondary. Higher education covers university only. The tertiary is all of this, higher is only the top bit. Okay. We are focusing on Certificate 1 to Certificate 6 here in the vet system. Now, as I said before, people come to this course having done their degree in nursing, very proudly tell me that they've done their degree and they've studied at academic level, and when they struggle with the TAFE system, it's because they have never been to TAFE. That's fine. There's some judgment sometimes attached to doing a TAFE course or doing a vacation education training course. But part of the reason we have this system is that people came out of university to lead teams without any management experience. Or they came with theory and research, but without any practical experience. I had some photocopy technicians in this class, and they interviewed for positions, and they employed people who had a vet qualification because they knew how to do the job in terms of photocopiers and systems. Whereas people who had an engineering degree didn't have that practical knowledge. So one of the reasons we have the vet system is to give people that practical. You may get the degree and then get to a workplace and they want you to do another qualification that's relevant to what you're doing. And that could be leadership and management because you're managing a team. Yeah. So it has a place and it's important that we understand that. We've got fit and proper person requirements. So we don't have to worry too much about that as a trainer and assessor, but as a CEO of an RTO, you must be a fit and proper person. You must meet the ASIC requirements in that. It's very similar to what ASCA wants you to have. You can't be bankrupt. You must have sufficient money to be able to pay your bills. You can't have a criminal record, or it has to be explained, etc., etc.
A fit and proper person.
Good.
The RTO.
Yes. So you're the sign-off person?
Well, yeah. Those checking.
Right. So financial viability risk assessment requirements. You've got to be able to pay your bills. Now, health. Having done some consulting work for health years ago and been told you have to wait 3 months for your money because, financial viability.
3 months.
Yeah, that's right. I'm glad I was only gravy for the sideboard, as my father would say. But financial viability must be able to pay your bills. not going broke anytime soon. That's obviously that's a very tricky area, right? Rex Airlines probably didn't think they were going to be going into administration anytime soon a few months ago, and then all of a sudden, bang. But you've got to meet those requirements and data provision requirements. You must collect data and you must send it off to the National Centre for Vocational Education and Research, or NCVER. What does that look like? Well, when you filled out your enrolment form, there were things like what year did you leave school, what was the highest level you got to, are you an Australian citizen, or why are you doing this course, I need extra skills for my job, etc. All that data goes to a database. So we can do a national census on who's doing courses, what's their background. It's all anonymous, obviously, it doesn't have your name, it just has the details that are collected in an anonymous way. It also collects who finishes courses, how many people enroll, and then there's satisfaction surveys which get sent out to students to say, you finished the course, what did you think of the course? It's a really convoluted questionnaire, and some of the questions are actually quite tricky to answer because they're not what you think they should be. But all of that is a requirement for you as an RTO to provide. Now, you as a teacher don't need to worry too much about that, except making sure you get the data that you're supposed to get on your forms and survey your students to see how they're going, etc. You do that for professional improvement anyway. The one you really have to worry about is these first two, RTO standards and the Australian Qualifications Framework. Okay. So the key stakeholders, the Australian government. The Australian government is in charge of the National Vocational Education Training System. The state and territory governments feed into that, and they have, in New South Wales, we have state training services. State training services are the people who provide the smart and skilled funding for you to do this course. When it's not fee-free, you pay an $1,850 enrolment fee. Your first qual, if it's a second qual, it used to have another slightly more. But the other $7,000 or $5,000 comes from smart and skilled funding and goes to the provider. So you're never paying the full course fee under smart and skilled. When it's fee-free, smart and skilled is picking up the tab for your enrolment fee. And then it depends on the provider as to how much fee-free is offered. There are caps placed on fee-free, part of the issue that we have. But state and territory governments, they monitor traineeships, right? So the national government sets the system, but then state training services look after apprentices and trainees and funding, and so they regulate traineeships. So if you've got a trainee in your workplace, then that would be through a group training company, or might be through Health probably has its own group training company, to be honest. But they will ask for evidence of how the trainee is going. There are regulations around trainees. Trainees are much more complicated in terms of paperwork and regulation than your garden variety training assessment student, right? Because you're not trainees, you don't have a sponsor, you're not signed into a workplace where certain things have to happen. You will have a training plan that you'll have to sign off on, because that says you are doing this course and these are the units that you're doing, and this is how we're doing it in terms of time. And those dates will say to the end of the year. It doesn't mean that we're doing them to the end of the year. So don't panic when you see your training plan and it's got different dates on it to your timetable, because we're just allowing the time for you to do it. Okay? But state and territory governments regulate, Australian government provides the funding. So even though state and territory state training services are providing smart skill, that money comes from the federal government. The same as school education money comes from the federal government. It's done at a national level and filtered down to the states. Right? Skills and Workforce Ministers Skills Council. Now, they used to be called COAG, Council of Australian Governments. Every sector, every portfolio within a government has a Ministers Council, Council of Australian Governments Council. So Law and Order has all the police ministers. Health has all the health ministers. And they get together to talk about health issues, health policy, health settings. At the moment, they're talking about changing the funding model, which since Kevin Rudd, they've been talking about that. I think in New South Wales, in education, New South Wales is holding out for a different funding model. I think Western Australia is balking at the health model. Eventually, they'll come together and they'll get their money, right? But in terms of skills ministers council, that's for vocational skills. So you have skills ministers. Murray Watt is the minister for skills at a national level. He was out at TAFE the other week talking to me, asked me a very random question, but we'll leave that aside. So they get together and they set the agenda for vocational education and training. That gives us our national system. So the 2012 VET standards are the standards that we work towards in terms of how a unit of competency is written. And that currently is unit of competency standard, and then the assessment requirements. And the assessment requirements have performance evidence, knowledge evidence, and assessment conditions. Talk more about that when we look at it in depth. But that is a standard template that you cannot move away from. You're using a national unit of competency, it's all very structured, it's all very compliant. So all of that stuff comes from the national system. You've got the state training authorities who regulate, and they are attached to the state and territory governments, basically. Within that, you've got the Department of Employment and Workplace Relations, DEWA, used to be DEWA. Before that, it was DES, Department of Education, Science and Training. But they've always regulated the VET system for a long time. They're responsible for training packages being signed off, essentially. They're responsible for funding the jobs and skills councils who advise them on what industry needs. They provide policy direction, etc., etc. You've got the Australian Skills Quality Authority, and that is quality, not qualifications. Quality authority. It's about the quality of the RTO and the service provider. So they are regulating you providing training and education as a VET provider. They're not regulating universities. They will be regulating universities that have qualifications within the VET system on their scope. So if they've got a certificate for in leadership management, certificate for in training and assessment, they will have to report to ASPA as an RTO. But in terms of degrees, masters, that's all done through a board of senior studies, etc., etc. That's a totally different system, right? Jobs and skills councils we mentioned very briefly a minute ago. What are they? What do jobs and skills councils do? That's why I don't like it.
The design the plan for the
Training. They identify the training needs of their industry. They're the industry experts on training within transport and logistics, within health, within whatever. And they will have things like the CFMEU when they're not too busy fighting hurting each other. And they will have people like the Master Plumbers Association or the Building Council, depending on their industry, right? Now, unions, when this system first came out, for every employer representative, there was an employee representative. So for every employer, there was a union rep. It was 50-50 right down the middle, parity. Howard government came in, that changed. We've never really gone back to that. We do still have union representatives, but not as much as we did when it first came out. This whole system was based on a report called Australia Restructured, which was by the ACTU and presented overseas. Right? So it was all about getting a national system with national accreditation. But jobs and skills councils, for every industry, they identify what the training needs are now and into the future, and they need for units of competency to be future focused. So we use language that's generic enough so that if the technology you're using changes, we don't have to go and rewrite the whole unit because we've got a generic term for the technology. Some industries, in IT for instance, some units used to talk about RSS feeds. Now I'm not sure what an RSS feed is, but they became defunct about 6 months after they wrote the unit. So be very careful. They're very careful now about what words they use in a unit because they can be obsolete in a very short space of time, particularly in some industries where there's massive change very quickly. But they do the work on the ground, they talk to industry, they run focus groups. When the diploma of nursing is being rewritten, they go around and run focus groups and find out what people think a diploma or enrolled nurse does, what they need to be able to do, what are the changes in the industry. And one of those key changes a couple of years ago, any guesses what the key change in enrolled nursing was a couple of years ago? So 2015.
Medication.
What?
Medication.
Medication endorsement was something that came in, yeah. But then after that, we went, you know what? This isn't a certificate 4, this is a diploma. So we went from certificate 4 enrolled nursing to diploma of nursing division 2. HLT 54115. Now we've got 54121 or something. So 2021, they updated the qual. We're about to register another one, every 5 years. We look at updating and qualification. So that will happen. It gives you a year out of a degree in nursing because ANMAC licensed, right? The national system would like universities to do credit arrangements for qualifications from the national vet system, but universities balk at that mainly because they can't always guarantee the RTO's quality. So they do it on an individual basis with different RTOs. But for things like nursing, because it's licensed by ANMAC and they've got to sign off and be, so they're going to go through not only ASQA but ANMAC's accreditation. And having been involved in getting nursing up on for 2 different RTOs, one for nursing, ANMAC are very, very thorough. ASQA are thorough, but ANMAC are even more thorough in terms of what they approve in terms of licensing. And so therefore, 12 months of the diploma goes towards the university nursing degree. Okay. The Jobs and Skills Councils, we'll do an exercise later on to find your Jobs and Skills Council. Industry training advisory bodies, we still have them, but they're at a state level. So they do the state training development, they do the state training identification of need, and before the Jobs and Skills Council sends the new training package off for accreditation, they have to consult with every state training industry training advisory body and every state training authority to say, yeah, we agree, this is a good package. No, this needs fixing. Victoria, having a very strong union leftist background over a long period of time in relation to training, wants there to be pathways from certificate 1 and certificate 2. That's not always possible because things like forensics and policing and being a pilot don't really have a pathway from certificate 1. There's no certificate 1 piloting or certificate 1 policing. You don't really have year 11 and year 12 students walking around a police station pretending to be a policeman. Reasons for that. Some of them act like that sometimes. I think Sam Kerr might have to do that in recent times, but she was silly in what she said, obviously, but she didn't get charged. So the certificate 1, certificate 2 are pathways. They're what we call enabling courses. Peak bodies, industry, employee, and community. So we talked a bit about CFMEU, the old Builders Labourers Federation before that. That doesn't change its spots much. You've got the CPSU, you've got the Health Services Union, Nurses and Midwives Council, you've got hospital representatives, you've got a whole range of employer representatives, and they're the peak bodies. They're the people who sit, they send a representative off the Jobs and Skills Council to talk about the training needs. Training package assurance teams, people like me who assure the product before it goes up for endorsement, sends it back to the Jobs and Skills Council, so yep, it's good to go, it's good quality, etc., etc. Communities of practice. What's the community of practice? Everyone has communities of practice, professional context. It's a community of practice.
Section of experts in a field who share knowledge.
Yeah, so it's a collaboration. It's a place where people share their knowledge, chew the fat. So chew the fat's a very blokey thing to say, so I'm we have a team at work that I call Chew the Fat. We get together every Tuesday, but or something else now. But yeah, people sit down and they work through stuff. They share good practice. They challenge practices that they think need to be changed. Registered training organisations. What's an RTO?
Education.
Yep. So they're vet providers. They're registered. Who are they registered with? ASQA. What's ASQA? Australian
Skills, quality, and
Beautiful. Probably knew that before you came into the room, though, so I'm not taking it too personally at the moment. But down the track, so RTO registered training. They're providing training. They're an organisation. They must be incorporated, or if they're not incorporated, they have to have a line of command. When we got audited in, I worked for an Aboriginal community control RTO for a number of years, managed that. When we were audited before ASQA, we were audited by the BTAP, which was the New South Wales Training Advisory Body, and then ASQA became the national system. They wanted to see our line of command, they wanted to see our organisational chart, and they wanted to see our CEO's statement of duties, like their job description. There was a big argument going on between the CEO and the board at the time, so we didn't actually have a signed off job description, but we found one very quickly because you have to have it, right? So ASPA wants to see all that sort of stuff. Professional development providers, people who provide professional development services, train people up, advise on good practice in relation to running an organisation, running ASQA, and then professional associations. You might be a member of the Private College of Teachers. You might be a member of the TAFE network if you're working in TAFE. Again, there's a bit of crossover between communities of practice and professional association. The professional association, you may be a member of nursing and midwifery, for instance, would be a professional association as opposed to the union, right? You've got the Australian Core Skills Framework. Now, I touched on that very briefly before. What's the Australian Core Skills Framework? So there's 5 levels in the Australian Core Skills Framework. And they're about level 1 being the lowest level, level 5 being the highest level. You might have heard of IELTS and the levels you need to have to be a nurse. This is a similar system, but it's from 1 to 5. It's about reading, writing, oral communication, numeracy, and learning. Now, learning underpins everything. So we won't talk about learning in terms of the ACSF. You will have some exercises later on where you have to apply the ACSF. We're not going to do the LNN unit, so you've been spared for some of the more detail of it. But learning, lifelong learning is a part of that. Reading to a certain level. It's expected that if you're in the workplace, you'll be reading at level 3 at least. Level 2 in some cases, but level 3 is what's expected most of the time, right? If you're reading complex documents, then that would be level 4. When you look at the ACSF, it gives you categories. In level 3, it's got 9 categories. And everyone's got a category with a description of what's expected of that person at that level. So if you're working in an organisation, level 3 will be able to interpret workplace documents and apply the instructions. Able to interpret and read complex documents is going to be in a level 4. Numeracy, you need certain professions, you need certain levels of numeracy. So for Diploma of Nursing, Division 2, you need numeracy to be able to do percentages and calculations of dosages, and that's at level 4. Some things might be level 5, but you need to be signed off on that. So sometimes it's before you start the course, sometimes it's by the end of the course, but you must have that level to be able to do the job. Now, obviously, the way we measure that is to see somebody do calculations and percentages and dosages and to get them right and to do it without assistance from somebody else. Somebody else is not doing it for them, they're doing it themselves. You've got the Australian Core Skills Framework. That's 1 to 5, reading, writing, oral communication, numbers, and learning. 5 by 5. There are 5 categories and there are 5 levels. You've got core skills for work. These are the things you must be able to do. Navigate the world of work. Use technology. Problem solve. Communicate with teams. Have the right attitudes. That's part of navigating the world of work, to be fair. But asking questions when you need to ask questions, knowing how to get through information, problem solving, or the photocopy is not working, what do I do? I know, I've got to ask. That's that. He's really good at that. Employability skills. Very much fit in with core skills for work. We used to call them Myer key competencies. Back in the day, they were Myer key competencies because somebody came along and said, people are leaving school and they don't have the skills they need for the workplace. They need to be able to write properly. They need to be able to speak properly. They need to be able to read properly. So we had 1 to 10 back then. Now we have 1 to 5, right? But they also need to be able to problem solve. They need to be able to communicate. Then we move to employability skills, and now we call them foundation skills. Foundation skills is all of these. But employability skills at one point, for a very brief period, sense of humour put in there, because employers wanted a sense of humour in there. Now the union said, no, we don't want sense of humour in there. I have my beliefs as to why employers want a sense of humour in there. They wanted to get away with certain behaviours, perhaps, and say, look, I was just joking. Or, I can't employ that person, they don't get my jokes. But I think it was more about, doing something wrong, but wanting to cover their backside. But employability skills is all communication, all the workplace. Digital literacy skills, being able to use computers in a workplace context, being able to navigate. Now, when you, for instance, if you look at the unit BSB Tech 201, which you'll look at in this course later on as an assessment and write some resources for it, BSB Tech 201 is used business software. When you look at used business software, it will talk about using social media or using platforms that we wouldn't have talked about 10 years ago in the unit of competence. So that's what I'm saying about we're continually making currency. All right. We've got nationally recognised training, NRT. Some of you may know NRT and people team replacement. In this case, nationally recognised training. Every acronym has a different meaning in different contexts, right? We employ skilled trainers and assessors. And where we don't employ skilled trainers and assessors, we train them up. So you might, let's just say you finish 2 units out of this course and you want to become a trainer and assessor. Somebody might snap you up to be a trainer because they've got a huge demand and they need to working for them. But the intent would be that you are going to finish the rest of the course, right? That you are going to get through the rest of the course. That's the context. Because you have to have the qualification to be skilled. Vocational learner support. Every RTO must have learner support. Every RTO must have learner support. So that support might be around disability, learning difficulties, might be around diversity, but they must have learner support. And you must show how you have that. So when ASC is giving you your license as a registered training organisation, you will need to have people in your system who do that job, or you'll need to have structured support consultants who do that work. You also need to have a library and blah, blah, or access to a library. And that can get complicated for a small RTO. Standards for RTOs, that's the 2015 standards, which will become the 2025 standards in July. But that's 1 to 8. We'll look at those as well because you've got part of your assessment is to research those. We'll start on that after lunch, right? The standards for RTOs, 1 to 8. Some of that's about being a fit and proper person. Some of that's about you as a teacher. A lot of it's about marketing and what you're allowed to say about your course. And you can't say things like, at the end of this course, you will get a job. Because we can't guarantee that you'll get a job. So no RTO can say you'll get a job. I had an RTO that wanted me to help them with a matter where ASQA had chastised them because they were offering Mother's Day gifts. They were offering special prizes or something if you enrolled because Mother's Day was coming up. ASQA said you can't do that. They'd attached the national qualification to it or something. It was a bit bizarre what they'd done. But they wanted to fight ASQA in court. There's no point in fighting. What? Just cop it on the chin and change what you're doing. You're going to spend a lot of money in court and you're not going to beat ASQA on a regulation that they are in charge of, right? Standards. So, but the standards for RTOs tell you what you can do and what you can't do, what you can say, how much information you must give to a student. They also say things like you must have a complaints process and that complaints process must be clear to the student, must be available on the web or in a place where they can find it easily. And you must have an appeals process. So if I give you a satisfactory result and you don't like that, you might want to appeal that. Now, I can't think in any case where somebody would want to challenge a satisfactory result, but you might think an unsatisfactory result and not yet competent. You might think I'm competent, this person just doesn't like me, or they didn't mark me fairly. And so you have to have the right to appeal that. So those things are in the standards. Working under supervision. What do we mean by working under supervision? Now, it has a meaning in nursing, but it has a particular meaning in working in an RTO. And I sort of mentioned it a minute ago in terms of you might have already got 2 units. What is
They
that?
don't have the full TAE.
Yeah, the full TAE. So you're working with somebody who does have it. You go back to the basket weaving episode. One person's got the Cert 4 training and assessment. The other person's the master of basket weaving, but they don't have the Cert 4 training and assessment. They've been basket weaving since World War I. The veterans came back and started doing it, right? But they don't have Cert 4 training and assessment. But they're working towards it. They're working under supervision of a trainer and assessor. So they can still teach, they can still assess, but they're doing it under the supervision of somebody else. That's what working under supervision. Very, very specific term for us. Right. Criterion reference. We touched on criterion reference before. What's criterion reference? We'll get a lunch.
So I just wanted to know if we'll get this PowerPoint.
Yeah, I sent it to Jason.
Okay, thank you.
And if I'm in Teams now, I can load it up.
Thank you. Thank you.
I sent it to a few people last night, but I didn't. The email that went out to you yesterday, was all BCC'd, so I didn't have access to all of you. I do have access in other ways, but given the timeframes, I thought we'd just put it in Teams, which we will. Criterion referenced. What is criterion reference?
I think determines and
So it's particular benchmark, particular standard. And the benchmark doesn't change. I'm assessing you that this water jug was filled to 3/4 with cold water. Yes, it's cold, 3/4 tick. Well, it's 3/4 and a bit. Do I mark that as it's criterion? Yeah, cool. Norm reference. What is norm reference? Norm reference.
Is it the standard of doing things? Make sure they stick to the standards.
Norm references we use it in HR, we use it in SHC tests. We have one mark, we mark one student and that's the standard, and then everybody else is marked according to that.
compared to that.
Yes, I compare this student to that student and I get a parabolic Gaussian distribution from fail to high distinction. Used in universities, it's used in the HSC in moderation, but criterion reference is strictly against criteria. You either can do it or you can't. This answer is slightly better than that one. That's a credit, that's a pass. They both answer the question, but I like this one better. But the standard joke is the lecturer has a few red wines and they throw your assignments up the stairs and the ones that land at the top, it's got more in them.
In the middle.
Not yet competent. My favourite story about norm reference, somebody who handed in I'm assistant primary school teaching, and one of her friends was at uni, and one of the guys he went to uni with gave his lecturer an assignment, and he got a B for it. Most people would be happy with a B, but he wasn't happy with a B. He went up to the lecturer and he said, "You gave me a B for this assignment." He said, "Yeah, well, there was this wrong, wasn't that wrong?" He said, "Yeah. But my girlfriend gave you exactly the same assignment last year and you gave her an A." Yeah.
And then he failed.
And then he took it back and put a fail. True story. So competent, not yet competent. We did that for the whole unit of competency, right? So talking about competent in the unit BSB 10201 used with the software, HLT wound management, competent or not yet competent. But each individual one is satisfactory or not satisfactory. All satisfactories becomes a competent. Go back to your point from before. There are systems where, and I'll give you one later in the course, where you can have a marking criteria that says these are essential and these ones can be missed and changing a tyre. But that's very tricky and open to judgment. Whereas if you have criteria and it's all criteria, tick, 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 you can then sign the person off. So all satisfactories become competent. Not yet competent, there's something missing, not satisfactory, fix this bit before, and it might be something minor, but it's got to be fixed. Now, this isn't about double spacing, 12-point font, that's a university thing, right? That can be about the standard of what you hand in, but you're not measuring that. The same as one of the things that people do wrong with assessment, we'll talk about this when we get to assessment. One of the things people do wrong with assessment is they give you a presentation on what you've learned. And then they mark your presentation, not what you learned, right? So your presentation might be fairly boring. But if you've covered the content of what you've learned, then that's what I should be marking, not whether you're a good presenter. I've worked with somebody who taught counselling for a private organisation, private RTO, and we're at the airport coming back from a conference or from a workshop, and they said, "Oh, I've got to mark this person." But they didn't record, they didn't use proper video techniques, and they didn't do this, and the lighting's really bad. I said, "They're not doing a film and television course, they're doing a counselling course. You should be marking their role play, not the quality of the video." And oh no, I'm still going to mark it down. That's norm reference rather than criteria. So criteria reference, you're marking what you should be marking. Not yet competent doesn't mean, in fact, what we do now is we say not competent. We don't say not yet competent, we just use not competent. We drop the yet out of it. Vocational competency against the job. Not about being a good priest, right? That's a different type of vocation. Industry aligned. What does industry aligned mean? It's aligned to industry standards, yeah. National focused. So nationally focused, it applies to all industry across Australia. You'll have unique local need. There'll be particular needs. Working in a remote hospital, it's different to working in the hospital, quite clearly. Working on the side of the road is different to working in an operating theatre. But they're nationally focused competencies. Competency standards is the benchmark. They're the standard to which you are assessing. And that is lesson 1. So you see that we've flown through lesson 1. We have 3 more lessons in this unit. I would anticipate we'll get through all 3 lessons today and get through this unit. Perhaps get into the assignment this afternoon. Yeah? We're all very studious. And even if you're not studious, you're pretending to be studious. Right? So 10 past 12. 10 minutes for lunch? Is that reasonable?
Yeah. If we have a shorter lunch, we can finish it.
Exactly.
That's right.
We can come back 1:45. Does that sound reasonable? Yeah. Or 1 o'clock. But 1 o'clock probably means we go later now. 1:45. 1:45. See you then.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Harry, I can't find the.
Yeah.
Thanks.
It might be my drafts then.
Jackie will upload it.
Oh, she found it.
No, she doesn't have it either.
All right. Okay. Well, let me. No,
So don't be
No.
up and leave.
I'll say. Oh, when you're leaving, I'll just say, is it something I said? Or-
Yeah, yes.